Okay, so my name is Carolina Vidal, and this is the second term exam. In the first question, I answered that first we gotta identify what is a legal smart contract. It is a computer code where, according to specific functions in a distributed ledger, the two parties agree to something, and it's legal when it's capable of self-executing on a legally enforced basis. Then we go to identify the advantages and the disadvantages of a legal smart contract. Advantages: we have identity and financial inclusion. It's private. The encrypted transactions is not limited by documents and geographic position. It reduces cost and risk of execution. It's more transparent and it's decentralized, and as a disadvantages has ignored cultural barriers. It might skip some negotiation dynamics. Not all people are able to use codes, and it's not precise, and it might be ambiguous and tricky in some moments. Then we have to take this for during COVID and after COVID for two parts. The first part will be when the COVID is still present and we identify that financial institutions are having a recession thanks to economic crisis. So, as we saw in advantages, as it is private and centralized, it helps enterprises that use this type of contracts to avoid any issues with a third party if they have loans or something like that, or if they have to send money. Also, in this moment, most countries are in quarantine, so the ability of not having to send documents and the part of the geographic position is helpful to continue with the business. And finally, as I said, enterprises nowadays maybe need loans thanks to the recession, and some banks are not giving their hand. So by exchanging directly with the other enterprise, they can continue in business even though they got debts and avoid failing in productivity. Creating in financial inclusion, but also it may be affected by the disadvantages that with this crisis people may need more plan Bs, and smart contracts, as are already determined, may have problems adding new things or taking more into account the crisis that we are living nowadays. Then we go for the second question. And in the second question, I said that it depends on which law they base their contract. As we know, a legal contract may be in two different laws, the civil law and common law. Therefore, they have to take into account the structure of this contract and the country they decide to base it, because it's different what the Constitution and Commerce Code says in Colombia that in Scotland, and if they decided to base it in here, they are binded to the Colombian Constitution. And as we know, they create special decrees in times of crisis which prioritize things between enterprises and government. So for example, in Colombia nowadays, if they have a decree that they cannot let the employees without work, so the China enterprise may have the solidarity or not take into account this and let them without employment. And finally, as the negotiation in China text said, they have to take into account a contingency plans in order to avoid discrepancies between the parties, and the contract must have this. So I believe there must be they must be accountable, but they have to take into account what they state previously in their contracts. That it's very important. And finally, we have the third question, that is about sustainability. And I believe they would implement more of these things, because first, if they implement this, global consumers are willing to pay more for this kind of business with social and environmental impact, making a reactivation of the economy and helping to sell faster their productions if there are static. Also, we can take into account that, including a circular economy, they can reuse their wastes. An example of this is that nowadays that COVID has limited transportation for security reasons, they can take the waste of production and can create new products or innovate with them and creating helping items, like protecting sweets with wastes of fabrics from textile industry. And finally, they can avoid losing money with a third party that is not able to pick up the wastes in this quarantine if they have an effective waste treatment. And that's all.